Welcome. This is Dr. Michio Kaku, Professor of Theoretical Physics at the City College and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And this is Exploration. Every week in Exploration, we discuss the fascinating world of science and its impact on society. And today, leading off, we're going to summarize some of the top stories of the past week. Our lead story today is Killer Satellite Warfare in Outer Space. The Indian government announced that it has successfully tested an ASAT weapon, an anti-satellite weapon, and many people fear this could start a new arms race between India and Pakistan, India and China. And this will also put pressure on President Donald Trump because he wants to push the Space Force. And so this could be a real mess if we have warfare in outer space. And then the question is, can artificial intelligence tell you how long you're going to live? This is not such an academic question because the baby boomers, well, they're retiring now. And after retirement, well, you go to old age. And then after that, well, let's face it, you die. But the question is, can computers predict how long you will live? Well, we'll have some surprising results from the United Kingdom where they used artificial intelligence to try to determine that fact. Also, pain, of all things, is in the news. On one hand, we have the opioid crisis, where people by the tens of thousands are dying because they want relief from pain. But on the other hand, there's a 71-year-old woman in Scotland who feels no pain whatsoever. And scientists sequenced her genes and were rather surprised when they found out the origin of why she feels no pain. She even gave birth to a child and felt nothing. So we'll talk about pain and also pain in artificial intelligence. At some point, many people think that robots may eventually feel pain. And if so, then perhaps we'll have a robots' rights movement to restrict the amount of pain they feel. And speaking about robots, one question that I get in email a lot is the future. The future of the job market. What jobs are going to go kaput? Like blacksmiths of old and wagon makers. We don't have blacksmiths. We don't have wagon makers anymore, but we don't really care anymore either. But what about the jobs of today? What jobs are going to be obliterated by the computer revolution? And what jobs are going to flourish as a consequence? And so we'll talk about the job market and the future. Which jobs are going to be impacted? What majors should you declare in high school and college? And if you're thinking about switching jobs because you got laid off, are you going to switch into another dead-end job? We'll talk about artificial intelligence and the job market on Exploration. Well, let's just jump right into some of the top stories of the past week. The lead story today, well, it didn't get much coverage in the Western press, but it got a lot of coverage in the East, and that is the Indian government successfully tested a killer satellite weapon. They were able to blow one of their own satellites right out of space. And the question is, what does that mean? First of all, it's going to put pressure on Pakistan because, for example, when the Indians successfully tested an atomic bomb, there was a lot of pressure on Pakistan to develop its own atomic bomb. And now that the Indians have successfully tested a killer satellite weapon, well, there's going to be pressure on Pakistan to test its killer satellite weapon as well. Plus, there's going to be even more pressure on the Chinese because the Chinese have already perfected their killer satellite weapon, and they have to maintain that lead over India. Not to mention the fact it's going to put more pressure on President Donald Trump because space war is in the news. President Donald Trump wants to have a space force, another branch of the military. Well, first of all, let me say this. Who has killer satellite technology? The United States, Russia, and China. And now we have a fourth power capable of blowing a satellite out of the sky. Now, you may say to yourself, well, what's the big deal? I mean, after all, these satellites are not guns. They're not battleships in outer space. No, but they're the eyes and ears of a government at the beginning stages of a war. Let's say you have two gunfighters, and one gunfighter reaches for sand, throws dirt and sand in the eyes of the enemy, blinding the enemy, and then at leisure, you can pick off the enemy. So in other words, blinding the enemy in the opening shots of a nuclear war would give you a tremendous first strike advantage. And that's what killer satellite technology is all about. But you know, the Chinese have an expression, never pick up a rock, only to drop it on your own feet. And so the question is, will we pick up a rock, this rock of killer satellite technology, only to drop it on our own feet? Well, first of all, who is most vulnerable to killer satellite technology? Well, we are, the United States, because we are the ones who feel over half the satellites there in outer space are connected to the United States commercially and militarily. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to knock a satellite out of orbit. Even the North Koreans will have the capability of one day shooting an atomic bomb in outer space, detonating it, and wiping out not one, but hundreds of satellites. Because you see, satellites are sitting ducks to a first strike. Satellites are not reinforced. Satellites are not maneuverable. Satellites don't have any defensive systems. Satellites are just sitting ducks out there. So some people think that a small country could send a barrel of nails into outer space, detonate it, and all that shrapnel from a barrel of nails would be enough to wipe out quite a few satellites. And as I said, if you detonate an atomic bomb in outer space, the electromagnetic pulse would be sufficient to knock out not one, not two, but hundreds of satellites in outer space. So in other words, it could be a real mess. It could be a real mess if killer satellite technology gets out of hand. Because once it starts, because satellites are so vulnerable and so essential, once it starts, you cannot stop it. Once it starts, it's going to basically ricochet and create a chain reaction. A chain reaction, and then thousands of satellites could be affected. And at that point, nations who are blind are going to reach for the most convenient weapon, and that is the hydrogen bomb. And so we have a real mess here. Hopefully, the nations of the world can reinforce the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. The Outer Space Treaty banned nuclear weapons in outer space, but said nothing about conventional killer satellite technology. And many people think that that's how war is going to start. War is going to start when there's an accident or a deliberate detonation of a weapon that blinds the enemy in a fight. And speaking about fights, how long will you live? You know, the baby boomers are getting older. They're hitting retirement age and beyond. And after that, you look forward to your golden years. And after that, well, let's face it, you die. That's a law of physics, in fact. But again, the question is, can artificial intelligence predict when you're going to die? Now, this is not an academic question, because hundreds of billions of dollars are invested in that question, specifically the insurance companies. The insurance companies hire top mathematicians and demographers in order to calculate, more or less statistically speaking, when you're going to die. But that's all done by hand. What about robots? Can artificial intelligence do this? Well, there's a group at the University of Nottingham in the United Kingdom that says, well, maybe. They got computers with artificial intelligent capabilities, and they fed them data, publicly available data, of 500,000 people. And then they placed bets of the 3 computer programs, which computer program would give you the best estimate of when you're going to die. Well, the first program basically analyzed physical activity and ethnicity. The second model looked at body fat, waist size, and the amount of fruits and vegetables you ate in your diet. And the third was very interesting. The third used deep learning. Deep learning looks at enormous amounts of data and then tries to figure out lessons behind all this massive amount of data, and they try again. Each time they get closer and closer to the correct result. Now that's how babies learn. Basically, it's a school of hard knocks. You try something, you fail, you size it up, you try it again and again. That's how you learn. In fact, when babies begin to speak, scientists have put tape recorders inside the baby crib, and they were rather surprised. At night, babies babble. Well, of course babies babble, but what do they babble? They repeat the sounds over and over again that they heard during the daytime. And that's how they learn, by hearing the mistakes, correcting the mistakes, and trying it all over again. Well, anyway, that's called deep learning, and robots today are beginning to use deep learning software. So the third program that they used looked at alcohol, job-related hazards, certain drugs, and then they had the machine learn from these mistakes. Well, when they looked at the data from these three computer programs, it turns out that the deep learning program was, in fact, the best. Now, what does this mean for you? First of all, let's be frank. These are statistical models. These are models that look at data from hundreds of thousands of deaths, and your situation may be unique. And so it's not going to give you a direct guidance. However, that said, it also gives you demographic information of the probability of how long you're going to live, given the fact you may have bad habits. Specifically, keep your weight down, exercise could be the fountain of youth, in fact, eat right, vegetables and fruits, keep your cholesterol level down, your blood pressure down, take moderate amounts of alcohol. And these are common sense things, but in some sense, they work. It doesn't work for everybody, but statistically, it works if you use common sense. There's a lot of information out there showing that your diet, lack of smoking, moderate drinking, fruits and vegetables, exercise, things like that, common sense, that's the way to go. You don't necessarily have to get all the latest diet books and fads. No, just use common sense. And all these computer programs pretty much show that you can predict how long you're going to live given all the factors that reduce your lifespan, like being overweight and lack of exercise. Also in the news, from Scotland, there is a woman who is 71 years of age who feels no pain. That's right. She doesn't feel pain. In fact, she doesn't experience anxiety or worries. When she gave birth to a child, she felt no pain whatsoever. And many people think, wow, this could have a tremendous impact, because look at the opioid crisis. Tens of thousands of people are dying. In some areas of the United States, life expectancy is going down, not up. Down because of an increase, a surge in opioid overdoses. And so some people are saying, maybe there's a safer way. This woman's not addicted. It's just her genes that allow her to experience no pain. Well, let's be blunt about this. She's not the first person that scientists have studied that feels no pain. In fact, for the last 100 years, scientists have analyzed individuals born without pain sensors. But there's a plus and a minus. You see, there's a reason why evolution gave us the ability to feel pain. There's a reason. Because if we feel pain, chances are something bad is causing the pain. It turns out that many young children who are born without pain sensors eventually lose their fingers because they don't feel any pain. So if there's a sharp object, for example, that's inflicting damage to their fingers, they don't feel it. What happens is, over time, all these cuts and bruises and burns accumulate, and doctors have to amputate their fingers and toes as a consequence. So in other words, there's a reason. There's a reason why we feel pain. Now, this woman was a little bit different because she felt no pain, but she healed rather quickly. Yes, she had burns. Yes, she had cuts. But they healed quickly, and so looking at her, you would never notice that there was anything wrong. Plus the fact she was cheerful. She was always happy. Did she ever experience worry and dread and anxiety? No. She was pretty much a happy-go-lucky person. When she gave birth to a child, she felt no pain whatsoever. In fact, it had a negative effect because it turns out that she needed hip replacement, but she didn't feel it. She didn't feel any pain in her hips until finally she realized that, yes, something was definitely wrong. And then it turns out that, yes, her hips were degenerating, but she couldn't feel anything. And so there's a plus and a minus for people who feel no pain. Well, doctors sequenced her genes and were shocked to find that she had a mutation that doctors had never seen before. It was a new mutation, a mutation that perhaps allowed her to heal faster as a consequence of not feeling the pain of cuts and bruises. And perhaps that gene was also responsible for the fact that she was always cheerful. Now, there is a downside. Doctors realize that she's also rather forgetful. And there are certain characteristics that she has that perhaps are not advantageous. But in the main, she did not feel many of the negative effects that other people feel who are born without the pain sensors. Now, it turns out that her father also probably had it, but he passed away. She remembered as a child that her father also apparently was happy-go-lucky and didn't experience much pain. But she has a daughter, and the daughter only partially inherited some of the characteristics. So the daughter does not have the full capability of not feeling pain. Now, what does this have to do with you and me? First of all, this gene is not for everyone, because it means that, yes, there's a downside. You could have burns and cuts and never be aware of it. But also, we may be able to figure out biochemically how it works and then modulate it, control it, so that we can create painkillers without having addiction, without having overdoses, and without having all the problems of the opioid crisis. So anyway, her genes are being sequenced, her genes are being analyzed, and they're quite novel. Another pathway by which one day we may be able to control pain and anxiety and depression without the serious side effects. And then one thing I get in emails, I get a lot of emails from people. One consistent theme is the job market. People are anxious. They see the movies. They hear all the buzz about robots and artificial intelligence, and they say, uh-oh, am I in a dead-end job? Or if you're a student, are you going to go into a job that has no future? Or if you got laid off, are you going to go to another job that will also lay you off in the future? Well, let's talk about it, because we've had a number of guests on Exploration talking about the job market. First of all, in the future, what will the jobs be like in the future? I think that in the future, the jobs will be those jobs that robots cannot do. That's being blunt about it. The jobs of the future will be those jobs that robots cannot do. Then the obvious question is, well, what are the jobs that robots cannot do? Well, there are three categories of jobs, and so you may want to learn them now because this is going to affect your life into the future. First of all, what can robots do very well? Robots, we forget, are adding machines. They add millions of times faster than us, giving us the illusion they are thinking, but they're not thinking at all. They're basically adding machines. And they do two things well. One is repetitive tasks that can be done over and over and over again. And second, data processing, analyzing huge chunks of data to glean any kind of lesson or valuable insight from this large amount of data. And so basically there are three kinds of jobs that are going to survive into the future. The first job may surprise you. And that is the job of blue-collar workers. Jobs that require semi-skilled knowledge, manual dexterity, pattern recognition. Jobs like gardeners. Jobs like sanitation men, garbage men, custodians. Jobs like policemen. Jobs like plumbers. Yes, they will have jobs into the future. No robot can fix a broken toilet. No robot can pick up garbage. No robot can fix faulty wiring. No robot can solve a crime. Now think about it for a moment. What do all these semi-skilled jobs have in common? First, you do not need a college education, but they require semi-skills that are non-repetitive. For example, to be a policeman, you have to understand the mind of the criminal, and you have to make all these value judgments that robots cannot make at all. Take a look at a garbage man. Every piece of garbage is different. Every piece of garbage requires a different set of abilities on the part of the sanitation worker. Think of an electrician. Every piece of wiring is different. And so these are semi-skilled jobs not requiring a college education, and they will generate jobs into the future. Another category of jobs is jobs that require human interaction skills. For example, take a look at a law firm. The paralegal that looks up precedences, they may be out the window because data crunching and search engines, well, that's what robots can do. They can process data much faster than a paralegal. Looking up precedences, looking up codes, things that are very tedious, well, that's what robots can do faster than a paralegal. But only a human can argue to a jury. Only a human can argue to a judge. Only a human understands changing moral standards. Only a human can convince another human of unpopular ideas. So, in other words, we're talking about lawyers that deal with human activity. They will have jobs. Now, take a look at my job. I'm a professor, and some people say, computers are going to replace you guys because already we have e-courses. In the future, students will have the internet in their contact lens. They'll simply blink, and they'll see all the lessons. So who needs a professor anymore? Well, it turns out that many courses at MIT are, in fact, available on the web for free. But what is the dropout rate in these online courses? The dropout rate approaches 90%. 90%. So, yes, some poor student in Pakistan can get on the computer, download all these lectures from MIT about artificial intelligence, and learn something. But what's the problem? The problem is there's no one that these people can talk to for advice, career guidance, homework assignments, answering specific questions about technology. None of that. So in other words, in the future, professors are going to be less and less regurgitators of technical knowledge and more mentors, career guidance counselors, teaching people the ins and outs of becoming a scientist or an engineer or a technician. And so those jobs are going to flourish because they require human skills. So in the future, human counselors, guidance counselors, career guidance people, people that deal with human activity, they will have jobs. The third category is perhaps the most important one of all, and that is intellectual capital. The capital of the mind, innovation, creativity, analysis, leadership, guidance. These jobs are going to survive in the future because robots can't do that. Robots cannot write a novel. They can copy a novel, but they can't create creative skills. And so it means that creative people, scientific people, people that involve analysis, they will have jobs. Take a look at stockbrokers. It turns out that stockbrokers no longer sell stock. Now, that may sound stupid, but it's true. You don't go to a stockbroker to buy stock anymore. You can do that on your wristwatch. So why do you go to a stockbroker? Because you want the inside dope. You want experience, know-how, savvy. You want to know the inside scoop on the stock market. You want to know where the good investments are. Robots don't know any of that. Robots can crunch numbers, sure. So stockbrokers will use computers, but for innovation, for analysis, for leadership, that's why you want to talk to a human. So in other words, intellectual capital is not just being Bill Gates and becoming a computer programmer. Yes, computer programs will have jobs in the future. But intellectual capital, capital involving creativity, leadership, artwork, these things are going to flourish in the future because robots are very bad at that. Robots can't create new jokes. They can regurgitate old jokes, but they cannot create new things. Creativity is not in the cards. Now, some people say, well, won't professors be put out of work, scientists be put out of work because robots can do the science? No. Robots are adding machines. They're aids, but they cannot replace scientists because science requires creativity and imagination. Now, take a look at being a doctor, an X-ray technician. They have to go through thousands of X-ray charts than a human. That's right. Robots can spot illnesses in MRI machines and CAT scans and scans like that better than a human. But ultimately, you want a human's judgment to make the life and death call. So in the future, yes, doctors will use these programs to analyze X-ray charts, but in the final analysis, when it comes down to human skills that affect life itself, you want a seasoned doctor. So, in other words, the jobs of the future will be in three categories. First, semi-skilled, non-repetitive jobs, blue-collar jobs that require a certain amount of skills, jobs that require human interaction skills, being able to convince people, give guidance to people. And the most important category of all is intellectual capital. That is innovation, creativity, artwork, science, computer programming, telling a joke, writing a book. Believe it or not, these are way beyond the capabilities of any robot. So if you're mid-career, thinking about changing, do not change into an area where there is probably going to be a lot of dead-end jobs. Go into a jobs that require skills, semi-skills of blue-collar workers, skills that require human interaction, or most important, intellectual capital.